Thanks for joining me for Painting a Cat Goddess Classical Art Tips. I'm Marilyn Butler. And we are going to look at a painting by a student. She used source material to create this, and she had some questions. So the source material was a calendar with paintings by Susan Seddon-Boulay, who is an amazing artist. And this student wanted to learn a little bit about how to get the kind of look that Susan gets in her artwork. So she did a smart thing. She chose to make a copy of a painting. This is Susan Seddon-Boulay. She's she passed away in 1997, but you can still get her amazing calendars. And on the left are some cards, like divination cards, that you can get on Amazon even today. And her artwork is wonderfully inspiring. So if you like this, I encourage you to go get some and even use it as a way to copy a piece of artwork to learn how she gets her wonderful kind of mystical techniques. So here we have the student's work on the left again. And the first thing we will look at is values. And you'll notice that on the student's work, there's a wider value range. So there's a value chart at the lower left there. And what that means is that the darkest darks are darker in the student's work than in the original source material on the right. You can notice that especially on the dark black on the ears. And a lot of people would look at that source material on the right and think, oh, the ears are black, but they're not really black. They're really a grayish brown. And so then some of the lighter areas are quite a bit lighter, even on the ears. So what we notice is that there's more contrast in the student's work, which oftentimes using a little less contrast can give a little bit more of a mystical feeling to work. And if you like that, you might want to try lowering your contrast. So I adjusted these values in the student's work on the left, and I made them a little lower contrast. The little thumbnail in the upper left is her original values. And you can see that when I adjusted them, the lights are not quite as light and the darks are not quite as dark, and they begin to approach the value range in the original artwork on the right. So here we can see all three of them together, the student's original painting on the left, the source material in the center, and the way I adjusted the student's painting on the right. So it has a little more of that mystical quality to it. So here also we'll look at the values on the cheek markings. And again, on the left, they're a little bit severe. They look a little dotty. And by lightening them on the far right, they have a little less prominence and look a little more natural, as they do in the source material in the center. So we'll look at chroma and saturation. On the far left is the student's original work. Actually, the thumbnail's the original. On the far left is after I had lightened it a little bit. And on the right-hand side, I gave it a little bit more color, similar to the source material in the center. So it has a little more of that orange glow to it. Now, the fur pattern is important when you're doing an animal, and when this is a cat goddess. So if we look at the left, that fur pattern is very, very even compared to a more natural look on the right. And we'll see in the next slide here, these red lines show the pattern. And you can see on the left-hand side, they're much more regular. They kind of look like Venetian blinds almost. Whereas on the right-hand side, they have scattered a little bit with more natural look. So that's very easy to do, is to take some kind of pattern on animal's fur and get it a little bit too even, and then it looks less realistic. So that's one thing to keep in mind here. Okay, the head shape. Let's take a look here. If we enclose the head in a box, we can see a little better about what's going on with the head shape. Now, one of the things that helps us is looking at the background. And if we look at the upper background enclosed in that box, we can see it's a very different shape on the left than it is on the right, which means on the left, the student got the ears very high and a little bit close in, whereas on the right-hand side, you see it's not as square on the shape on the right. It's much more rectangular, and that wider look is what gives more of the cat face look rather than human. And sometimes you can see this better upside down. I encourage my students to often work with their source material and their drawing upside down, and it helps you see shapes much better. So also we notice on the side, that little background on the left-hand side is showing more background on the student's work than the original source. And the same thing on the right. So the source material, the head takes up more width in that rectangle, which is what gives it more of a cat-like look. Also, the angle of the chin. So on the left-hand side, you see the angle of the chin is a little more steep, more like a human being. And on the right-hand side, the original source material, that jaw angle is a little flatter, which gives it more of the cat-like look. And this is sort of outlining the muzzle area, and you can see how the shape of the muzzle looks a little different. Again, wider on the right. So if you want a cat look, you want to get a wider look to the head. Now, when we take the green lines and run a vertical through the corner of the muzzle there, you'll notice on the left-hand side that green line goes through the outside corner of the eye. And on the right-hand side, you'll notice that the green line is much further out than the outline corner of the eye. So dropping a vertical when you're trying to draw anything, human faces, animal faces, whatever, will help you line things up. And if this student had used a vertical from that kind of corner point of the muzzle, that would have helped get the head a little bit wider and more cat-like looking. We also want to notice where that vertical line intersects with the ear. So on the students on the left, the ear is quite a bit further out, and with the original source material, that vertical line actually goes through part of the ear. So all of that lining up helps you put things in the correct position. Now let's look at the nose. So the student on the left actually did a very good job of getting a center line between the eyes, a center line in the lips, and of course, on a face, when you have a center line, everything should line up. On the right-hand side with the source material, even though that green center line is pretty much in the center between the eyes and the lips, we notice that the nose is a little bit moved over. So it's making, if you look at just the nose part, it looks like this cat goddess's head is turned a little bit towards the right, but the lips don't end up in the position that would coordinate with that. So it's a little confusing about exactly which direction it's going. So actually the student did a good job on her own here. If you look, I have moved the nose back on the original. I'm going to go back. So this is where it was first. And when I move it, you can see it looks a little bit more natural. So here we have on the source material, on the left is the nose in its original placement, and on the right, the nose in a little bit more even placement. Now, we could have done this another way. On the left, instead of moving the nose, I could have moved the lips to the right a little bit. Either one would have worked in this particular drawing. It's just that the nose and the lips definitely want to line up with each other. And looking at the lips, we notice on the student's painting versus the source material, and the source material, so there's a little bit more, it's a little more obvious about light and shadow on the lips. And this is important on the students' drawing. We don't have as much of an obvious feel for that top lip being in the shadow and the bottom lip bottom lip looks like it's in the light, but since the top lip, we're not sure if it's in the shadow, it affects how we perceive that bottom lip. So now this is the upper lip darkened. Now I'll go back. So here it is before it's darkened, and I darkened it a little bit, and you can see it looks like the lower lip is lighter, but I did not change the lower lip at all. I just darkened the upper lip. So let's look at lips a second. So if you look at lips from the side, and good advice from my teacher, Harold Stevenson, was when you're drawing something from the front, always think about what it looks like from the side. So you notice in all these drawings and paintings that the upper lip is what we call a down plane, and the lower lip is an up plane. Now, most of the time in this world, we have light hitting our subject from kind of above. That's partly because we're used to the sun in the sky, that's above. Most of the lights, artificial lights, are coming from above. The difference is Halloween lighting comes from below us, and that's why it's weird. That's why it looks scary. But all of these lips, you'll notice the upper lip is a little darker and the lower lip is a little lighter, because that's a kind of a standard shadow pattern on lips when light's coming from the top. And you can see that close up here in the close-ups of all these lips. So you want to think about that. Most of the time, your upper lip is going to be want to be a little darker than the lower lip. So here we have the lips again for these two pieces. So let's take a look at the eyes. So this is the student's work on the top and the source material underneath. And you'll see there's a little more highlight on the source material, which gives a little more life to the eyes. So if we add that, I added highlights there. If you look on the student's work, now I'm going to go back, no highlights. And if you see what happens with highlights, you can see that it gives some life to the eyes. And we're going to notice that in the little sketch on the right-hand side, directly opposite the highlight will be a little lighter area of the iris. And we'll see why that is. So this is a human eye, but it works the same way with the cornea. So you see with the blue arrow is showing us the highlight. On the right-hand side, we have the side view of the eye with the cornea above it and the pupil in the center. The green is the iris. And what happens is the light hits the highlight like it does on a magnifying glass, and then the cornea diffuses that light. It's still going in the same direction, so it hits the iris on the other side, and that's why it makes that little light area, as we can see here. So you can see on the drawing of the human eye that I did that there's a little lighter area directly opposite the highlight on the iris. So this is before is underneath the student's work, and after, which shows a little highlight on the eyes and that little bit of lightness on the iris, which gives a lot more life to the eyes. So then she asked about the hands, and hands can be really tricky. It's good to practice a lot of them. You can look at your hand in a mirror and practice drawing it. And the reason you want to look in a mirror, if you look at the hand the way you see it, you will not see anybody else's hands from that angle. So that's why if you look at your own hand in a mirror, that's the way you'll see other people's hands. And that's a good way to practice. One of the things you can do is look at the outline shape. So on the right-hand side, I have drawn a yellow outline, boxing in these hands. And if we look at the yellow outline boxing in the hands on the student's work, you can see that the proportion of that shape is different. So if you draw the outline shape first and then fit the hands and the fingers in there, you have a better chance of getting good proportions on the fingers and the hands. You also want to look at the angle of that area where the fingers insert into the palm of the hand. And you can see that by the red line that these two angles are different. So getting that angle a little straighter up and down would help give some guidelines for drawing those hands. And we can again look at that shape. You know, the fingers are a tricky shape, but if you draw a line around the outside and then fit the fingers inside, you're going to be more likely to get the proportions correct than if you just start drawing a long finger and you're not sure exactly where to end it. And we have the same thing going on with the knuckles here on the far hand. So if you look at that angle that is formed there, that will help you get the shape of the fingers correct. So then we'll look at the flowers briefly. So the main difference here is the flowers in the source material look a little bit more transparent and a little lighter, not so solid. So, and they're a little more golden. So I just threw a little glazing on top of this to get a little more golden color. And you can see that they look a little more ethereal that way and a little less solid. So here we have the finished suggestions. On the left is the student's original work. In the center is the work that I adjusted slightly as best I could using the program that I have. And on the far right-hand side is the original source material. So in the center, we lowered the value contrast, meaning the darks aren't quite as dark and the lights aren't quite as light. We added a little more of that yellow-orange chromas to the background and to the areas on the cat goddess. I squished down the shape of the head a little bit. You'll notice it's a little bit squishier in the center than it was on the student's drawing on the left. So it's starting to approach a little more the shape of the source material, the head in the source material on the right. The eyes have highlights and that little glow. So in the center adjusted one, we are more focused on seeing the eyes, and that's for two reasons. One is because we've added the highlight and that little glow, but the other is because we've lowered the value contrast to the rest of the painting so that we focus in on the eyes. And the eyes are always a good thing to focus in on. The lips have a little more of that feeling of light on the lower lip and shadow on the upper lip. And the flowers are a little bit more, a little bit lighter in value, not so solid and thick. And I did a little bit of adjustment on the fur here. There wasn't too much I could do with my program, but you can see the difference in the fur in the center. I put a few scattered lines in there to show how we could get the fur at a few different angles in there, rather than kind of the structured, lined up like, like soldiers on the student's drawing. And anytime you can get a natural irregularity in there, you're going to get a more natural look. I was not able to adjust the hands or the muzzle in my program, so those would want to be adjusted too. But these are the suggestions on in answer to what the student asked about how to get closer to the source material in her painting. So thank you very much. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe below. I'll be doing more of these. And I offered private lessons, consultations, and friendly feedback via Zoom and video recording. You can check that out on my website, oceanviewarts.com, where you can also contact me if you have questions. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you found something of interest. Thank you.